We all know that smoking and alcohol are linked to many different diseases. Smoking itself is linked to 16 or more different types of cancer. It has 7,000 chemicals, 69 of which cause cancer, as well as alcohol, also known as ethanol, is linked with cardiovascular disease, several different types of cancer, and liver disease, especially when drank in excess over a long period of time. In the US, from 1980 to 2021, smoking decreased from 52 million people to 28 million people. This is a decrease of 33%, despite the population increasing from 226 million people to 331 million people. So the population increased by 33%, but smoking decreased by 100%. So we need this same trend for sugars. We need the same trend for ultra-processed foods, not only in the US, but worldwide. Sugar and ultra-processed foods are also toxins. They cause similar effects to both smoking and alcohol, and some different effects. The big food industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that continuously markets ultra-processed foods and sugary foods to not just us, but our children. There's over 252 names for sugar that are coded throughout 70% of the grocery store containing ultra-processed foods, many of which have these sugars. In ultra-processed foods, if it has more than 2 to 4 ingredients and you do not understand or know what the ingredients are, it shouldn't go into your body, very likely. Real foods were produced by Mother Nature or God, depending on your choice of terminology. Real foods, we all know, come from animals, they come from plants, they come from fruits, they come from their nuts and seeds. They were produced by Mother Nature. They were not produced by a large industrial factory, stripping away the fiber and goodness from the foods and adding a bunch of different industrial, unnatural products to them, which becomes no longer foods but pseudo foods. 80 to 93% of Americans, for example, have some sort of metabolic dysfunction, which most of this is linked directly to overconsumption of food generally, as well as ultra-processed foods and sugar. Sugar is made up of 2 equal parts. One molecule is glucose, the other half is the fructose molecule. When we eat too much glucose, what happens is we have an insulin response in our body every time this glucose goes into our system. Insulin's job is to storage. Insulin is a storage hormone. It stores the glucose out of our bloodstream into cells. What happens over time is our cells start rejecting the insulin, called insulin resistance. Pancreas, the organ that produces insulin, needs to produce more insulin, and it taxes the pancreas. Eventually, muscle cells become insulin resistant, as well as other cells in our body. And this, therefore, the requirement for production of more insulin by the pancreas. Eventually, it can't do its job anymore, and then it becomes pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. These metabolic dysfunctions are the major risk factor for a majority of chronic diseases that are the death sentence for many people today, including heart disease, including many different types of cancer, including neurodegenerative diseases. The other half of sugar, if that wasn't bad enough, is called fructose. Fructose is actually several times more toxic than glucose. Fructose has no place in the body. It serves no purpose. The cells can't process it, so the liver has to process it, and it's a major contribution to fatty liver. And when the liver is fatty, it's less efficient, and it exacerbates the insulin resistance that's already being created by the glucose, an overload of glucose. The average American eats about 300 grams of carbohydrates these days, over 3 times as much the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, or the recommended daily limit. The body has to process all this carbohydrate. A lot of it comes in sugar and in ultra-processed foods. Another major source of glucose in the bloodstream is starches. So glucose is not only in sugar, but glucose is plentiful in starches. Starches include things like breads, pasta. I love pizza, unfortunately, as well as potatoes. These starches quickly convert to glucose by the intestine, and it goes readily into the bloodstream, increasing your glucose. That also contributes to the insulin response and is also a culprit of metabolic dysfunction, as well as taxing the pancreas, the production of insulin, and leading eventually to the whole stream of chronic diseases. A lot of people these days, they go on a keto diet, especially after years of too much ultra-processed foods and sugar. And what the keto diet does is that it dramatically reduces the carbohydrate intake, increases the fats and protein intake, so that there's less available glucose in the bloodstream, leading the body to burning fat for energy rather than the glucose in the diet. When the body has too much glucose and we're eating too often and we're not fasting at all, intermittent fasting overnight for 12 or 14 hours or even 16 hours in a day, and having our eating window within 8 hours to 12 hours, what happens is that the insulin's constantly in the bloodstream pushing this glucose into the cells. And by definition, insulin is a storage hormone. When an insulin's pushing the glucose into our cells, we cannot burn fat by definition. This is the opposite of fat burn. It's creating fat, storing the glucose in the fat in the cells rather than toning down and allowing the fat to burn, for example, during a fast. So natural food is the way to go. As I said earlier, Mother Nature created natural food. Chicken, fish, beef, especially lean beef is even better, eggs, then the proteins, then we go to the vegetable and plant kingdom. All the beautiful different types of fruit and plants and seeds and nuts that our ancestors have been eating for thousands of years. Our body has evolved to process and metabolize natural foods. All these ultra-processed foods and sweeteners and all the different artificial ingredients that I don't know a fraction of their names that you read on labels. You have to have a PhD in this stuff to understand it. In 70% of the grocery store, it's poison. Our body has not evolved to process these poisons. So the body needs to do something with it. A lot of them are carcinogens. A lot of them lead to insulin resistance. And a lot of them are just simply not needed in the body. The liver's got to process them. The body's got to process them. Very taxing. In future episodes, I will go into many other topics. The key thing I want to emphasize in this video, to summarize what I spoke about, is the fact that our society has majorly decreased the amount of smoking through government policy and effective action and people listening. We need the same outcome with our sugar intake and our carbohydrate intake, and particularly ultra-processed foods. Many have over 252 types of sugars. The sugar breaks down into glucose and fructose equally, and in excess, glucose is toxic to the body. The body can only process so much, and it creates too much insulin spikes, as well as the fructose that is not needed in the body. It serves no function, and it just intoxicates the liver, creating NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. As well, the fructose interacts with the mitochondria, which is the energy engine of every cell, produces ATP, which is the energy currency for the body, and the very important organelle in every cell of the body. And the fructose actually interferes with some of the receptors in those, making them less efficient and decreasing their effectiveness. So in essence, our body is evolved to produce and process natural foods like the animal kingdom, as well as fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, which have a plethora of amino acids, natural fatty acids that are instrumental to our health, which I'll go more into detail in future videos. So until next time, please take this to heart. Literally, it will affect the quality of your heart and prevent heart disease likely, as well as prevent the cancers and neurodegenerative diseases and delay them long into your future and hopefully prevent them altogether. So take this very seriously. This is both a warning and inspiration and information for you to take instrumental action to optimize your future. Bye-bye.